Imagine one of the 3,000. A man baptized the very day Peter preached at Pentecost. Linen tunic, dust still on his sandals, the water of his own baptism barely dry on his skin. He lies down that night among brothers who have sold what they owned so that no one among them would go hungry, and he falls asleep. And he wakes up 2,000 years later, on a Sunday morning, in your city. He does what any believer would do. He follows the crowd, because a crowd on the Lord's day can only mean one thing. The church is gathering. His heart lifts. He walks faster. He steps through the doors, ready to break bread with the family of God. And the first thing he sees is a countdown timer on a giant screen. Fog rolls across a stage. Colored lights sweep the ceiling. A card reader blinks red by the door. He turns in a slow circle, and he starts to look for the things he knows. He looks for the bread on the table. He looks for the widow being fed. He looks for the brothers standing in a corner, arguing with joy over the apostles' doctrine. He looks for someone, anyone, on their knees praying. And what he finds is a light rig, a coffee bar, and a man in a bright vest directing cars in the parking lot. So he stops a smiling greeter at the door, and he asks the only question that matters to him. "Brother, where is the church?" And the greeter smiles a little wider and he says, "You're standing in it." He would not recognize it. And here is what I need you to hear before we go one step further. It was not the building that confused him. It was not the lights or the screens. It was the worship. It was what they were doing and what they had stopped doing. Because everything that made his gathering a church in Acts chapter 2 is the exact list of things that this room had quietly deleted. Now understand what this video is and what it is not. This is not about which religion is right. This is not about which denomination follows Jesus best. And it is not a fight about doctrine on paper. This is something much simpler and much harder to escape. In the whole book of Acts, there is exactly one place where we get to watch a church being born. One snapshot taken before there was a single denomination, a single building fund, a single professional clergyman, or a single program. And the question this video puts in your hands is this. If you held your own church up against that snapshot on an honest Sunday, would even one mark survive? Would the people in Acts chapter 2 recognize your gathering as the same thing they were doing? Because there is only one kind of church that still worships like the book of Acts. Most do not. And by the end of this video, you will know, honestly, whether yours is the one. Let's find out together. Before the first mark, let me be honest with you for a moment. Everything I am about to show you, I did not learn in a seminary. I learned it the hard way, reading the scriptures for myself, after years of sitting in rooms exactly like the one that man woke up in, being told what to believe and never once told to check. I wrote all of it down, every verse, every test, in a short guide called Be Your Own Pastor, for people like you who are tired of depending on someone else to tell them whether their faith is even real. The link is in the description. Keep it in the back of your mind because by the end of this video, you will understand exactly why I had to write it. And two small things before we begin, and then I will not ask you for anything else until the end. First, make sure you are already subscribed, so this truth does not slip past you. And second, tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I read them. I want to know where the family is gathered tonight. Now, the one thing you have to see before the 3 marks make sense is what Acts chapter 2 actually is. Peter has just preached. 3,000 souls are baptized in a single day, Acts chapter 2, verse 41. And then Luke does something he does nowhere else with this kind of detail. He takes a photograph. Verses 42 through 47 are a picture of what that newborn church did immediately, in the very first hours of its life, before anyone had time to add a single human invention to it. No cathedral, no hierarchy, no stage, no brand. This is the church in its factory state. The pattern of the Spirit before 2,000 years of human editing. Everything that came after is an addition. This is the ruler. And now we lay 3 marks of that photograph against the room you sit in every Sunday. The first mark is in Acts chapter 2, verse 42. Listen to it slowly. And they continued steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine and fellowship, and in breaking of bread, and in prayers. Count them. 4 devotions chained together with the word and Luke gives not one of them higher rank than the others. The apostles' doctrine, the word itself taught plainly. Fellowship, and that word in the Greek is koinonia, which does not mean sitting near a stranger, it means a shared life, your life tangled up in mine. The breaking of bread, which is the Lord's table and a real meal, a family eating together. And the prayers, the whole body crying out to God with one voice. And notice the phrase Luke chooses to bind them. They continued steadfastly. That Greek word proskarterio means they clung to it. They refused to let it go. This was not a weekend event they attended. It was the spine of their entire lives. Now here is the confrontation, and I put myself inside it with you, because I have done every one of these things. We traded the apostles' doctrine for a motivational talk that could have been given by anyone with a microphone. We traded fellowship, that tangled shared life, for the experience of sitting in a dark room next to strangers we will never speak to and never miss. We traded the shared table, the family meal, for a plastic cup of juice passed down the row once a quarter. And we traded the prayers of the whole body for a professional on a headset praying at us while we checked the time. 4 devotions. Ask yourself without flinching, how many does your church still actually do? Think of a table with 4 legs. Saw off any one leg and the table falls. The church in Acts stood on all 4. The modern church sawed off 3, propped up the last one, the stage, the performance, the talk, and pointed at that single leg and called it church. A one-legged table is not a table. It is a stick lying on the floor with a good sound system. But there is a second mark in this photograph, and it is the one that would make a modern pastor change the subject faster than any other. Because the church in Acts did something with money that no building fund campaign will ever repeat. The second mark is the strongest one, so sit with it. Acts chapter 2, verses 44 and 45. And all that believed were together, and had all things common, and sold their possessions and goods, and parted them to all men, as every man had need. And Luke is not exaggerating for effect, because he says it again 2 chapters later, Acts chapter 4, verses 34 and 35. Neither was there any among them that lacked, and distribution was made unto every man according as he had need. Read that phrase again. There was not one needy person among them, not one, in a movement of thousands. Now, before your mind runs to the objection, let me close the door on it, because the text closes it for us. This was not forced. This was not a confiscation. When Peter confronts Ananias in Acts chapter 5, verse 4, he says plainly, "Whiles it remained, was it not thine own? And after it was sold, was it not in thine own power?" Do you hear that? Nobody was compelled. The property was theirs to keep. This was not a system imposed from above. It was love pouring out from below, so radical and so voluntary that it looked like a miracle, because it was one. And here is the direction of the money, because that is the whole point. In Acts, the money flowed out of the pockets of those who had, and into the needs of those who lacked, inside the body. There was no building budget. There was no salary for a star. There was no fund for a bigger screen. The treasure of that church was the met needs of its brothers and sisters. That was the wealth they counted. Now the confrontation, and this one costs me to say. In Acts, the church emptied its own pockets for its people. Today, too often, we build the church to fill its pockets. They sold their possessions so that no brother would lack. We run a capital campaign so the sanctuary can get a bigger screen. Picture it honestly. In Acts, a family sells a field and lays the money at the apostles' feet so that a stranger's children will eat. And today, in too many rooms, there is a fundraising thermometer painted on a screen, the red line climbing toward the goal for the new parking lot, while a widow in the 3rd row quietly counts her coins and decides whether she can give again this week. Both of those are churches asking for money. Look at where the money is pointed. So ask the honest question, the one that tells you almost everything. In your church, does the money flow toward the people who lack, or toward the building and the man on the stage? And yet, even this is not the mark that most churches have lost most completely. The third one is hiding inside a single phrase in verse 46. 3 words that quietly deleted the middleman between you and God. Watch, the third mark. Acts chapter 2, verses 46 and 47. And they, continuing daily with one accord in the temple, and breaking bread from house to house, did eat their meat with gladness and singleness of heart, praising God, and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to the church daily such as should be saved. Now I have to stop you here and protect you from a lie you may have heard, even from people who love this passage. Some will tell you the early church had no temple, no public place, that they hid in houses and that buildings are the corruption. That is not what the text says, and I will not let you walk away believing it. Read it again. They were in the temple, and they were breaking bread from house to house. 2 places, not one. The temple was the public square, the bold and open proclamation for the whole city to hear. The house was the table, the broken bread, the daily intimacy where they knew each other's names. The early church kept both. And here is the confrontation. They kept the public square and the kitchen table. We kept the stage and we killed the table. That is the mark almost no one has left. They gathered daily. We gather once for 75 minutes and we call it enough. And look at what happened around that table, because this is the phrase that changes everything. They ate from house to house, believer teaching believer. No clergy caste required in the room for the bread to be holy. Paul describes that same gathering in 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 26. When ye come together, every one of you hath a psalm, hath a doctrine, hath a tongue, hath a revelation. Every one of you. Not a stage with a professional and an audience with its phones out. A room where each believer brought something, because each believer could read and pray and discern. And do not miss who did the growing. And the Lord added to the church daily. The Lord did it. Not a marketing team, not a church growth conference, not a better light rig. When the church was the 4 devotions, the open hand, and the daily table, God Himself added to their number, day after day. Today we run the growth conference, we buy the fog machine, and we wonder why God is not adding. Maybe He is waiting for the table to come back. So let me ask you plainly, when was the last time your church was house to house? When was the last time you sat at a real table, with real bread, with a dozen people who know your name, and every one of them had something to bring? Or is the house the one thing they would never, ever let you replace the building with, because the building is the thing that needs the money, and the man, and the stage? And that is where our sleeping visitor finally finds it. He walks out of the room with the lights, and he keeps walking, past the coffee bar and the parking attendant, and at last he comes to a small house with the door open, and he stops. Real bread on the table. A dozen faces that know each other by name. Everyone talking, everyone bringing something, and no one on a stage. And his shoulders come down, and the breath goes out of him, and he says quietly, "There it is. This is the church." And then it hits him. He had to leave the building of lights to find it. 3 marks. The 4 devotions of Acts chapter 2, verse 42. The open hand of verses 44 and 45. The daily table of verse 46. And here is the thing I need you to see about all 3. Not one of them needs a building. Not one of them needs a budget. Not one of them needs a professional standing between you and God. They needed the Word, the family, the table, and the Lord who added to their number. That is all the first church had, and it was everything. So here is the question I cannot answer for you, and I would not dare to try. Not, is your church the right denomination? Not, does your church have the best preacher in town? The question is the one that man asked at the door. If one of the 3,000 walked into your Sunday, would he recognize it as the same thing he was baptized into? Or would he stand in the fog, looking for the bread, looking for the table, looking for someone praying, and finally have to ask a stranger, "Brother, where is the church?" And if what I shared today actually stirred something in you, if some part of you felt that quiet fear, the fear of standing before Christ one day sure of yourself, and hearing Him say the most terrible words in all the Gospels, "I never knew you," then let me point you to the next step. Because everything we just walked through, this idea that the first church was ordinary believers, at a table, reading and breaking bread and discerning, without a cast of professionals standing in the middle. That is exactly the thing I had to relearn for myself. And I put all of it into that short guide I mentioned. Be your own pastor. 3 protocols. How to read scripture with no one standing between you and God. How to make the real decisions of your faith without asking a man's permission first. And how to recognize a false shepherd in under 30 seconds. I even put the verses on the priesthood of every believer in the original Greek inside it, because the church in Acts was house to house, believer teaching believer, and that is not a privilege the stage was ever meant to take from you. I am not going to put a number on it here. Go and see for yourself. It is linked right below this video, and there is a code on your screen right now. I made it for the believer who is done depending on any pulpit but Christ's. Now, before we close, if this channel has been feeding your faith, do 2 things for me. Make sure that subscribe button is on and tap the bell so the next study finds you. And if you want to help us put this truth in front of people who have never once heard it, the ones still standing in the fog, asking where the church is, you can tap join and become a member of this ministry. Think of it as sowing into the work, nothing more. And if you cannot, you are still family here. Either way, stay. And whatever you do not stop with this one. The next video I will put on your screen is not the end of this conversation. It is the next step in it, the one I believe God has for you right now. So go there next. You do not need a stage to meet God. You never did. The first church knew it at a table, with bread, with the Lord adding to their number daily, and so can you. May the peace of Christ, which passes all understanding, guard your heart and your mind, until I see you in the next one.
50 years in church, and nobody ever taught me to test what I was hearing. 3 days with this guide did.
Don't wait for a Sunday that never comes. It's right there under the video. You already have the shepherd. Now get the map.
The 30-second test alone, I checked my old church against it. I cried.